Welcome to People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer. Today I'm chatting with Matteo Bordin, the Vice President of Product at Oyster. We're going to talk about how new technologies, like low-code development, are changing HR's role in the organization, as well as the practitioner's use and approach to advanced technology. All that and more on this edition of People Tech. Hi, Matteo. Welcome. So I wanted to talk about embedded software and low-code software, which I know Oyster has been looking at and developing for a long time. These two things make it easier to create and use solutions. But I wondered if you could talk about the dynamic behind all of this. Is this the kind of thing that the market's been calling for and users really want? What brought Oyster to the point of wanting to develop and build these solutions?
Yeah. So the Oyster is in the business of global employment. And the core challenge for us is to quickly develop HR solutions that are compliant in multiple geographies, in multiple jurisdictions. And when I say multiple, I mean 150 countries across the world. So it becomes very, very challenging for us to fine-tune our software to respond to both the nuances of local legislation and to the evolution of those legislation, because every year the government sends out new updates to local legislations, they change how taxes are calculated, and so on and so forth. So in order for us to speed up the development of our solution, we decided to adopt a different approach, which consists of developing our in-house low-code platform that enable us to easily roll out new functionalities on our platform. So I'll make just a simple comparison here. Basically, you have one option, that is to say you hard code the complete behavior that represents the logic of tax, payroll, local legislation in every country. Or the choice that we did was to develop an internal platform that enables domain experts to declare these changes, these regulations. Like, for example, saying I work in France. So to say that in France we have a probation period that is 4 months, can be renewed, and this is blah, 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 all the regulations to do that in a way that is very close to their way of expressing constraints. So it's a declarative language, and then having a sort of virtual machine that transforms that declaration, that specification from domain experts, from legal team, basically, into actual software. And this enables to empower domain experts in the legal team to actually develop software without requiring engineering investment. So we built this infrastructure so that we can scale very rapidly across multiple countries, and we can always be up to date with our product.
And do you find that users, like people in the legal department or any other department, do they like the fact that they're taking on the responsibility for building a solution? I mean, I understand why it makes sense to let them do so, but ultimately, are they willing and ready to do it?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. The challenge is building an interface for them to somehow formalize their knowledge, formalize their expertise in a way that is easy enough for them to master and to control. Of course, we are not asking lawyers to code. We are asking lawyers to fill an interface that is highly graphical. It's sort of what you see is what you get, if you want, a kind of interface where they can express all these regulations. They can see and also kind of predict what is the impact on the actual software platform, so they can kind of test it out, which makes the whole process unusual initially for them, but also very fulfilling because they are much more empowered. They feel much more part of the development engine of a software company, and they feel much more at the core of the actual business that the software company is doing, which is developing software solutions.
How about the HR user, the HR staffer? Is there anything unique about them aside from other users? about taking things into their own hands?
Are you referring to our users, so our customers, or
Could be your customers or just HR people, in general.
yeah? So in general, HR, the HR audience, especially our HR audience, is particularly sensitive to everything that is related to compliance. All in all, their role, they have two main roles. One role is, of course, to attract and nurture talent. And the other role is to also protect and ensure that their company, their employer, is always compliant from an HR perspective. So they have this double interest, which we managed to serve with our solution. And in particular, what we were describing before is very reassuring for them to know that we do have that legal expertise, that knowledge in-house, and that we are able to formalize in a programmatic way that knowledge into our platform.
How about embedded software? The idea of taking your application and sort of melding it with another commonly used application. What's going on there? What's behind that? I hear more and more about it. Again, is it something users are really looking for, or what are the advantages of it? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So first of all, the use of let's say white labeling or embedding solution inside third parties, there's nothing new under the sun. When we talk about a very successful company like, I don't know, DocuSign has been doing that for years. They take their electronic signature capabilities, they slap it into a third-party app. Looker, which has been acquired by Google, had the same capabilities. This idea of embedded analytics that you can bring in your app and customize is something that has been pretty much used. Now, in our specific domain, we came very quickly to the realization that there is a need for a best-of-breed solution in the global employment space, that is to say across EOR employment, global payroll, global contractors, and the level of investment that is required to achieve that level of completeness, that level of quality, is very, very tangible, very, very significant. So from our perspective, it is very unlikely that a lot of the players in the HR tech ecosystem is going to put that investment down in order to create something that is comparable to what Oyster built over the last 3 years. It's by itself an own venture, so 600 people, a lot of investment there. So our idea is really to try to empower the whole ecosystem to embrace this idea of global employment. And in order to do so, the most direct way is to make our technology as accessible and as distributable as possible. And this is where the embedded play comes in. This is to say, you're building a solution that can be easily distributed across any HR tech platform out there by enabling any players in the ecosystem to embrace to support global employment for their customers. So that ideally this way of working, this future of work, is actually becoming a reality.
One of the things that strikes me about embedded software is there's more people doing it. You're finding more people looking for ways to put their products into Teams, say, or Slack or something like that. From your point of view as a solutions provider, how does that impact your product? You're giving up a certain amount of control, possibly a component of your brand, because you may not control the graphics and the look and feel so much anymore. Is it becoming something that you're more concerned about, or is it changing the way you develop your products?
So it definitely changes the way you develop the product from a technical perspective, because first of all, you need to think the product in a much more modular way. And you need to think from the start about how third-party platforms are going to connect to your product. Is that via APIs, web widget, etc.? So the architecture, the software architecture part becomes much more dominant conversation in the beginning of the product development, and this translates to to making much more important investment in those areas, and to think with an additional persona in mind. Usually when you think about your persona, when you develop software, you just either your customers or your users. And here you have also your partners as an initial persona, which means really taking a different, having a different mindset, having a different approach from both a product development perspective, a go-to-market perspective, and a business development perspective. So when it comes to pricing, etc., there are a lot of implications to that. So that definitely makes a change. It requires being much more technical, if you want, when it comes to product development. And of course, it has an impact. It has an impact on the visibility of the brand. Now, in our specific case, and in the case specifically of EOR and global payroll, we have had the opportunity of building a very important brand in the past. We have a B Corp certified company, the only one in the space that has a B Corp certification. So we are pretty confident there that our brand is strong enough to be sustained, even though we distribute through an embedded go-to-market.
Is it going to the point where you think you may not worry about your own way in, your own interface and such, because there'll always be somebody else handling the distribution? Or do you think that the standalone solution model is with us for a while?
I think that the two, at least in the foreseeable future, the two solutions will continue. In particular, because today the way that we have outlined the embedded strategy is at multiple level of complexity and investment. That is to say, third-party platform can just connect through APIs for data exchange with our platform by maintaining completely separate experiences, while they can also bring everything together. So I think that in the immediate term, the two will continue to exist. In the future, let's say 3 years from now, I think that the embedded will be the dominant distribution play. I also think that while there are several players in the ecosystem, I think that this kind of partnership always requires some kind of direct involvement from both parties in order to be successful. So I don't expect anyone to pick the API, build an application without our consent or without our knowledge. So there will always be some kind of, in the end, there is an economic transaction behind the scenes happening. So there will always be some kind of control or some kind of visibility on how the final customer experience. Of course, we care about the customers in the end. We care that our customers, even though we distribute sometimes through a third party, we always care that our customers can get the best experience as possible.
I wanted to take a step back a little bit. We're talking about, sort of a specific angle of the technology, but of course I have to ask you a couple of questions about AI, or nobody would take us seriously.
Sure enough.
With all the things that's going on out in the world right now with generative AI and such, how do you view that world?
So that's an interesting question, because there are multiple ways to answer that, and all of them are probably equally fine. First of all, I think that, of course, everybody acknowledges that AI has come as a kind of a revolution to our space, in general for every blue and white collared work job out there. Now, it's also important to acknowledge in which cases a generative AI solution make absolute sense, because that's where it can bring additional efficiency, it can bring additional creativity to the table, and in which other cases, on the other side, we do have perfectly workable solutions that do not require any AI augmentation. So in our specific case, I do think that there are part of the HR workflows and the HR day-to-day jobs that are perfectly fine being executed the way they've been in the past, because basically they are completely deterministic algorithm. And there are areas which are more around the supporting the creative and the more complicated knowledge-related work of our customers, where AI can actually bring value. Now I'm going to make an example here. We recently announced a partnership with Josh Bersin. Josh Bersin is a pretty well-known influencer in the HR tech space, where basically we built together using our first-party content an AI system to augment the capabilities of HR teams worldwide, basically helping them mastering the nuances, the complexities of global employment. This is one good example where AI actually makes sense, because if you can have very strong first-party data that you can rely on, and you can build a safe system that access those data only, that is instructed on those data only, you really bring that kind of value and productivity increase to your customers. So that is a good niche, a good example of valid application of AI.
Do you think in general, I'm not talking about Oyster specifically, but in general, are companies going out there and like looking for solutions that they can apply AI to, even if it doesn't necessarily make sense, but has the bandwagon gotten so big that you just have to start putting your toe in that water, whether you really see an immediate need or not?
I'm going to answer with my personal opinion, which is not representative of anybody else here. There is a risk that I see here, is that the companies that are building just a small layer on top of ChatGPT, OpenAI, or whatever, they're going to be disrupted by the next ChatGPT 5.0 or 6.0, whatever. In the sense that if the only value that you bring is a very small software layer or experience layer on top of the core technology, yeah, the next model, the next LLM will be rich enough to cover that somehow, to provide that level of flexibility. So I think that the challenge of jumping on the bandwagon is also there is a marketing aspect, of course, but there's also being smart enough in understanding where you can actually provide value and finding a sustainable way to develop a product in the long term can produce value for your customers and for your company. And that's, I think, a little bit challenging right now, in the sense that it's so easy to access AI capabilities that the temptation to build these small packages is very, very high. And sometimes I don't see this as evolving into something that can have long-lasting value for customers.
Well, thanks very much for taking the time to talk today. It was great to talk with you. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Sure. Happy to. Thanks very much.
My guest today has been Matteo Bordin, the Vice President of Product at Oyster. And this has been People Tech, the podcast of WorkforceAI.news. We're also a part of the Work Defined Podcast Network. Find them at www.wrkdefined.com. And to keep up with AI technology and HR, subscribe to Workforce AI today. We're the most trusted source of news in the HR tech industry. Find us at www.workforceai.news. I'm Mark Pfeffer.